Okay, I was not planning on doing another video so soon, but I thought I should get my opinion out there on the Kurt Angle vs Jeff Hardy match at TNA No Surrender. Probably the most interesting topic to me as far as mainstream wrestling is concerned in quite a while. And I kind of wanted to not so much answer the criticisms regarding the booking of the match, but kind of give my interpretation on what they were trying to accomplish and why I think it worked, at least up until the very end. I thought about doing this as a response to some of the people who were most negatively criticizing it, as in the way the match was booked, but I almost did. But the only reason that I didn't is because I think that a lot of how you reacted to the way the match was booked depended on how into the match you were in the first 20 minutes. If you were really into the match in the first 20 minutes, yeah, I can sort of see why the booking of the match would have angered you a little bit. Although I still think there should have been a level of appreciation for what they were trying to present in those 5-minute intervals. Where I differ is the view of just how good were the first 20 minutes of that match. Was it this great and wonderful spectacle? Well, if you were to use the word spectacle, maybe I could agree with you there, because what they did in the first 20 minutes was a spectacle, but I wasn't quite so much into it as everybody else appeared to be. And my biggest problem with it very much relates to the reason that I didn't give Shawn and Taker from this year 5 stars. Because that descended into this slew of finisher attempts where you never believed that the match was in danger of ending with every near fall that they attempted. That was always my contention with that match, and it continues to be my contention with that match, at least as far as giving it full marks. The thing with that match, though, is that you still had HBK working over a body part to near perfection to make the first half of that match about as perfect as wrestling can ever be. So, and then in the second half, that's where I think things started to kind of distort a little bit, at least in my opinion. So that's my problem with that match, and Jeff Hardy and Kurt Angle had the same problem with finishers and signature moves, but they didn't have the awesome working over a body part that HBK and Taker had. So the first 20 minutes were just kind of a big adrenaline rush where I wasn't really connecting with either guy, and I didn't really buy into any of their near falls. You know, among the bright spots of that portion, because yes, there were bright spots, I'm not trying to say there weren't bright spots. You know, you had Hardy swanton to the outside, and you had the ending sequence where Kurt Angle had the ankle lock in for all that amount of time, even though Jeff Hardy really didn't play the best babyface in peril during that, but it was still a pretty cool sequence. So the first 20 minutes really weren't my cup of tea, but then the first 5-minute extension happened, and things slowed down. My opinion, that's the best thing that could have happened to that match at this point. Because not only are you giving the guys in the ring a chance to portray some real emotion, you're actually giving those nonsensical 20 minutes a purpose, because after all the shit they did in those 20 minutes, you can buy into this much slower pacing. And the crowd are still into it. That's important to note. The crowd are still very much into it. You know, and don't get me wrong, I see the same problems with the Impact Zone fans that everybody else does. But the worst thing they did in this match was chant "you fucked up" to Jeff Hardy after he did a botch that was very much, could have been very easily been ignored. That's the worst thing they did. So the first 5 minutes I started connecting more with both guys, because they're selling the effect of their match, and they're doing just enough to transmit the message that they're warriors who are not going to give up, who are going to continue on through all this havoc. So that was what I got out of the first 5-minute extension. And then comes the second 5-minute extension. Okay, my opinion, Kurt Angle bleeding at this point is great. It's absolutely great, because if they're going to have a second 5-minute extension, they need a certain aspect that would take the match to the next level. Take the match to the next level, I guess, and Kurt Angle bleeding was that clincher in my opinion, because the other aspects of the match remained the same. The pacing was the same, and the crowd reacted to it. I would say they reacted to it the same at best. You know, at this point they're just keeping the crowd at the same level of tension and excitement at best. If you wanted to argue that the crowd were losing the crowd at this point, I would disagree to an extent, but I wouldn't really argue with you that hard on it. So, when ideally at this point the crowd should be getting more and more hot for it as we get closer to a finish, because that definitely wasn't the case. So, okay, the second 5 minutes, Kurt Angle bleeding, the best thing that could have happened to the match at that point. And if this had had a finish, I would have easily said it was a classic match. Easy, you know. 4.5 to me is that cut-off point where you get to from a great match to a classic match. Well, not an all-time classic, but a classic for the year in question. And if you look at my rating, that's not what it got. It got a great rating, but not a classic rating, because the match having a no finish was a mistake. And I'm not trying to deny that it wasn't a mistake. It was a mistake, because, you know, even though I would say the finish wasn't completely illogical, because there would have been realistically, there would have been heightened kayfabe concerns over the wrestler's well-being at this point. It just didn't feel right. We wanted a winner. The story of the match was that we were supposed to get a winner, and we didn't get a winner. So, you know, the most important part of the match we didn't get, and that is the biggest problem I have with the match. But I still don't think it ruined the match, because it just didn't cancel out all that I was feeling for the match prior to that. So that is my opinion on the match. Now, like I said, if you were really into the first 20 minutes, then maybe the change of pace was like an unwelcome intrusion, I guess. But for me, there was too much emotion to get out of those guys in those 5-minute intervals, and that saved the match for me to a degree. Didn't ruin the match, it saved the match. So that's my opinion on it. People obviously disagree. I wouldn't be making this video if that weren't true. So if you want to call me out on anything I said, just go right ahead. I'm out. Later.